This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. We begin today with news about the nation's economy. The Commerce Department says it slowed sharply in the second quarter, even while consumers increased their spending. Mark Martin joins us now in the CBN newsroom with more. Mark.
Heather, the Commerce Department estimated the gross domestic product, which is the economy's total output of goods and services, grew at a 2.1% annual rate from April to June. Now, that's a drop from a 3.1% increase in the first quarter. But consumer spending rapidly grew by 4.3% after the first quarter's poor performance of only a 1.1% annual gain. Consumer spending is responsible for about 70% of economic activity. Auto sales especially led to the increase, but the boost in household spending was countered by a widening of the trade deficit and the slower rebuilding of business inventory. Economists also pointed out that business capital investment dropped in the second quarter for the first time in 3 years, and that could be the result of hesitance by companies to commit to projects because of the uncertainty associated with the trade war between the U.S. and China, the world's two largest economies. The Associated Press reports most analysts think the U.S. economy could slow during the rest of 2019 as a result of global weakness and the trade war. AP also reports that China's growth dropped last quarter to its lowest level in at least 26 years. This after President Donald Trump increased his tariffs on Chinese imports to pressure China over its methods to counter American dominance in technology. The head of the president's National Economic Council, Larry Kudlow, said last year's 4 rate increases by the Fed are to blame instead of Trump's trade policies for the drop in business investment. In a CNBC interview, Kudlow said, "I don't think the trade factor is nearly as important as the monetary factor. I am hoping that monetary policy makes the shift that investors are expecting." The president responded to Friday's GDP report, tweeting, "Q2 up 2.1%. Not bad considering we have the very heavy weight of the Federal Reserve anchor wrapped around our neck. Almost no inflation. USA is set to zoom." Heather, a lot of information there. Back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Mark. And our CBN News financial editor, Drew Parkhill, is here now to unpack this a little bit. What is your takeaway?
Okay, first of all, it was not nearly as bad as what it looks like. Because you have to understand, Heather, how the GDP is calculating without getting into all the weeds. Okay, it gets a little arcane, but one thing that they calculate is business inventories. Well, business kind of eased down on that, and that counts as a big negative. In fact, they took like a full percentage point off. You subtract that out, and the rest of the economy is doing fine. It's around 3% growth, which is what the president wants, which is what we'd like to see. So it really isn't that big a deal. The other thing is that the consensus forecast, which, for whatever that's worth, was actually lower than this. So it did better than than analysts and economists had projected, which was around 1.8%. So year over year, it's still doing pretty well, but this was kind of a blip. It may carry over into the next quarter, but it's not the end of the world at all.
It is interesting that consumer confidence is high, but businesses seem to be holding back a little bit.
Businesses are holding back, but again, that's the inventory factor. Okay, consumers, again, this is partly where the Trump tax cut comes into play because people have more money to spend. So yeah, again, as I said, it looks one way, but in reality, in the real world, people aren't going to notice too much.
All right, we've heard concerns about a possible recession. What are your thoughts on that?
Very unlikely in the near term. A couple years down the road, it is possible. There are signals that could happen, but in the near term, that's what people would worry about because that's when you could see layoffs. That's when you could see, the raise that you might expect does not come through. That's another thing, is that in the last few years, people have actually seen raises in real terms, which they hadn't seen in a very long time. That's the Trump tax cuts and the economic program did a lot toward economic restructuring. Business tax rates came way down. Some of that's been passed down, and it's helping people as well.
All right, and thinking about the stock market, it didn't seem worried by today's news. Where do you see that all going?
This run in the stock market there's no way that it's over. Right now, the Dow is a little over 27,000. It's up, I don't know if I want to say 50%, but very high since Trump has come into office. I would say that before this is over, the Dow is going to go over 30,000, which is a big round number, attracts a lot of attention, and I think that that's very realistic. Maybe by the end of next year, I don't know if I could say when, within a couple years. That's actually not that big of a gain. That's only 15%. So I think we're still going to go higher. Again, a recession is possible, I emphasize, a couple years down the road, but it's just not here in the near term. Don't see it.
Good news for now. Thank you, Drew
You bet.
Parkhill. All right, well, officials in New York say that after an intense outbreak, the number of measles cases there has dramatically declined. Rockland County officials say the number of cases per month has dropped by 29% in May, 63% in June, and 42% overall. Officials say an increase in vaccinations has made the difference.
While the state of emergency is no longer in effect and the outbreak is waned and under control, our vigilance will not be compromised or slowed in any way. We will keep our foot in the pedal and our eyes on the road ahead. With the authority of the Health Commissioner's orders, which will be continuing, and the new legislation allowing for medical exemptions only for school entry vaccinations, we will be inspecting all schools to ensure strict compliance. Let me be very direct and very clear. We will not allow this disease to again take root in our county, whether it be due to administrative failures, an attitude that the law does not apply to all, or some misguided sense that the world revolves around you, to the direct detriment of all.
A Senate Homeland Security panel tackled the issue of security and response failures during last year's school shooting in Parkland, Florida. A gunman killed 17 students inside Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. That was in February 2018. The attack brought to light security faults surrounding the shooting. Two parents spoke at the panel in D.C. They noted that the school did not hold a single code red drill that year, so students and staff did not know what to do when the gunman started firing. Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri led a statewide commission that examined security at the school and provided recommendations to the state. He also testified Thursday.
There had been only one minimal 1 hour of training for school staff, and that occurred just a few weeks before the shooting. There had been no formal training for the students. Gates at the Stoneman Douglas campus were left open and unattended, building and classroom doors unlocked, and teachers and staff lacked adequate communication infrastructure.
One victim's father told lawmakers that more needs to be done to secure school campuses, improve mental health screenings for students, and improve responsible firearms ownership. Well, more than 6,000 Syrians are hoping that President Trump will renew their temporary protected status in the United States for another year. Their status is set to expire next week. If it does, they will be forced to return to Syria. A government offensive there has displaced hundreds of thousands of people since April. And just this week, the State Department called Syrian attacks that strike civilian infrastructures a, quote, act of desperation. Joining us now with more is Erica Hanachek. She's the Government Relations Director at Americans for a Free Syria. Erica, thanks for joining us. The Trump administration has recently moved to end this protected status for Haiti, Nepal, and Honduras. That's being challenged in court. What are your hopes for Syria at this point?
As people know, temporary protected status is a legal status for people who came here legally to this country to serve as doctors, students, engineers. And so what we're hoping to see is that this status is renewed for Syria. Syria's conflict began in 2011, and it's clear that deteriorating conditions have only gotten worse. People that go back to Syria now are basically facing the equivalent of a death sentence. We're hoping that DHS renews this status.
Okay, yeah, tell us a little bit more about the situation on the ground in Syria. It just seems so bad. Is there any kind of safe way for Syrians to go back at this point in time?
The State Department's been really clear in its designation and its travel advisory for Syria that no part of the country is safe from violence. I mean, every part of the country, whether it's Idlib, where the offensive is currently underway to retake that province, or even in northeast Syria, where Iran's presence looms large, there's no place really to go back safely. Even people returning back to Damascus, it's been shown that at least 2,000 of them have been targeted for arrest, arbitrary detention, torture, or even forced conscription. So these are the conditions facing Syrian TPS holders that are currently here contributing to our economy and really just want a safe place to go until it's time for them to go home.
Mm-hmm. For Syrians with that TPS status here, what is their life like? Are they actually able to work? Do they access U.S. benefits? How does it all come together for them?
So I actually had the chance to meet some Syrian TPS holders who came to Washington last week to speak with their members of Congress, and it was interesting hearing the variety of stories. I talked to Mo, who's a dental student at the University of Iowa, who has been going to school there for the past few years and says that he wants to, be a dentist in Iowa and be able to pay off his debts. He won't be able to do that if he gets sent back to Syria prematurely. Likewise, I was talking to Michael, who was raised in a Christian family in Aleppo, and he fears that going back to Syria could, mean certain death facing Iranian-backed militias that have occupied that area, or even being targeted by the Assad regime. He currently lives in New York and is an artist there, and so it really is a wide variety of, Christians, Druze, Muslims who have come to the United States through legal channels, many of whom came even before the war started, but have gotten caught up in a tough situation now where there's nowhere for them to go. Many of them hold Syrian passports that have expired, and the government has asked them to come back to Syria in order to get it renewed, which means that they'll be really targeted for detention and arrest. And so things aren't safe for them. They're here. Actually, a coalition of ours, American Relief Coalition for Syria, did a study that shows that most of the TPS holders living in the United States are actually very highly educated. Many of them hold bachelor's or even master's or doctorates. And so
really
these are people here that
I just
pay
want
taxes.
to cut you off for just 1 minute here to ask, what is your indication from the Trump administration at this point? What do you think is going to happen?
We're hopeful. The Trump administration renewed this status in March of last year. And we're hopeful, too, that USAS Acting Director Ken Cuccinelli understands that, the situation facing Syrians going home, especially based on his, activism around the human trafficking issue. But we've been told by allies in the administration not to take anything for granted. So we just want to make sure we get the message out there and encourage the Trump administration to renew the status.
Well, we'll definitely be following this. Erica Hanachuk, thanks for your time. Coming up, why 3 fraternity brothers at the University of Mississippi have been suspended, the shocking photo that surfaced. And before we go to break, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNews.com.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
By sharing their knowledge.
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
And their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
An investigative journalism group, called ProPublica, is reporting that a University of Mississippi fraternity has suspended 3 students for a picture that they took. As you can see, it shows them standing with guns in front of a bullet-riddled sign honoring Emmett Till. Till was a 14-year-old who was tortured and murdered in Mississippi in 1955. His death went on to propel the modern civil rights movement. ProPublica reports that the Department of Justice might investigate these students. And joining us now is author Jamar Tisby. His new book, The Color of Compromise, examines racism in the church, and he is a PhD candidate in history at the University of Mississippi. Jamar, thank you for joining us. This photo has stunned a lot of people outside of Mississippi, but you're in Mississippi, you're studying at Ole Miss, where these young men are undergraduates. What is your response to this?
As with many people, it's anger, it's frustration, but it's not really surprise. I mean, if you think about the context in which this occurred, the state of Mississippi is the final and the only state to still have the Confederate emblem on its flag, a flag that state lawmakers refused to change, even though they could. If you look at the University of Mississippi itself in 1962 was the site of a race riot where white people were protesting violently the entrance of a single African-American student, that being James Meredith. It's also the campus where a Confederate monument still stands at the main entrance to campus. So this all occurred within a context of racism and the celebration of the Confederacy that makes an incident like this almost predictable.
Yeah, I saw you tweeting today about the culture at Ole Miss. Do you think that it indeed contributed and shaped these young men and perhaps led to this photo?
Listen, we can't play around with racist symbols and iconography. Just earlier this year, there was a Confederate rally that marched from one Confederate statue, which was in the center of the town of Oxford, to the other Confederate monument, which, as I mentioned, is at the entrance to the university. And the refusal or the resistance to give up symbols like that, to take them down, to celebrate other aspects of American culture that point to our unity and our strength as a diverse people, well, that's going to have consequences. On top of it, they were in the Kappa Alpha fraternity. The fraternity has now suspended these three young men, but this is a fraternity that cites Robert E. Lee as their spiritual founder. And so these celebrations of the old pre-emancipation South are part of what leads to this. And unless we challenge these things in a comprehensive and decisive way, we can look to see more of incidents like this in the future.
Jamar, you also tweeted that you would like to know what churches these young men go to. What was your thinking behind that tweet?
So my first book is called The Color of Compromise, and it's the truth about the American church's complicity in racism. And so what I look at is the involvement of Christian churches, particularly white Christian churches, in the construction and the defense of racism in the United States. And so many times throughout the course of U.S. history, the church has been silent, complicit, or has compromised when it has come to issues of race, if not outright supporting racism and white supremacy. So my question there is, what kind of teaching have these young men received from their churches about the issue of race, if any? Is this something that was going through their mind that I'm explicitly going through what my pastors and other church leaders have taught me? Or is it something that even came up because they didn't hear about it much from the pulpit or from their other Christian friends? We can't divorce these kinds of incidents and the way that people think about race and ethnicity from their religious beliefs. So I want to know what kind of discipleship, teaching, mentoring is going on within their community of faith.
Really fascinating. We're just about out of time, but I want to ask, what would you like to see happen in this case at this point?
I want to see a few things. Number one, they need to increase their own awareness. I have no idea if they know even the history of their own state, especially when it comes to the civil rights movement in Emmett Till. I also want to see the development of meaningful, authentic relationships with people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. Get out of your narrow social bubble with people who probably believe a lot of the same things around race. And lastly, I want to see some commitment to concrete action, whether that means joining a student group, joining the student government, lobbying to get this Confederate monument at the campus taken down, or helping to put up a new historical marker. They need to commit to racial justice actions immediately.
All right, Jamar Tisby, really interesting. We'll be following this. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we will be taking a look at what's trending on faithwire.com. Stay with us.
Are you suffering from feeling tired or worn out during the day? Can you not turn off your brain at night? You are not alone. Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, and I've partnered with the Christian Broadcasting Network, and we're going to bring you some unbelievable information that you can use tonight to get a better night's rest.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Protect Your Sleep today.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Welcome back. Here with this week's trending stories from FaithWire, CBN's Jessica Chacos and Dan Andros.
Well, sexual purity is taking center stage on this season of The Bachelorette. Contestant Luke Parker was ousted from the show after he and Bachelorette Hannah Brown disagreed on the issue of abstinence. Parker received backlash on social media for his convictions. And here to tell us more about it, managing editor of FaithWire.com, Dan Andros. Dan?
Yeah, hey, first of all, disclaimer, I don't really watch this show. It's not exactly my thing, so I'm going to do my best to boil it down from all the information we've gathered over at FaithWire. But yeah, Luke Parker, what we've been interested in covering is that he's been outspoken about his Christian faith, and he's kind of put that on center stage in this show, which is an interesting place because it's kind of you'd think it's kind of an unorthodox place for Christianity to show up in a series such as this, where it's highly sexualized and things of that nature. But he's out there and he's staying true to his faith. And the interesting thing is Luke's brother has now come out and said that he thinks the show is just anti the gospel and went out of their way to edit Luke to sort of look like the villain here. And basically they portray him as a woman shamer and make it look like he's sort of a holier than thou type who is condemning Hannah for her sexual past. But the reality, at least according to Luke and his brother, is that they built this relationship, Hannah and Luke, on The Bachelorette, based on the fact that they had this mutual faith. And she actually told him that she had a quest to be pure and for purity. And so that's what lured him to even go on the show in the first place. He didn't want to do it. But then she ended up actually having sex on the show. And when he found that out, he was very upset. But the producers framed the whole thing as if Luke was somehow the bad guy in this situation, when it appears that she kind of went back on the convictions that she had told him in the first place. So try not to make it sound too gossipy because it is a Bachelorette after all. But Luke trying to stick to his faith, and so it was interesting for us to cover and watch that play out.
Well, a founder of a veterans charity claims YouTube censored one of their promotional ads because it contained the keyword Christian. Well, this isn't the first time Google has received criticism for their censorship of Christian content. Dan, has Google made any kind of statement regarding the allegations?
Yeah, actually, Google, via YouTube, which they own, did give us a statement after we reached out in this story, and they did say that. I'll read it here. It says, "We know that religious beliefs are personal, so we don't allow advertisers to target users on the basis of religion," the statement read. "Beyond that, we don't have policies against advertising that includes religious terms like Christian, which is interesting because Chad Robichaux, who was the former U.S. Marine veteran who ran this ad, and it got flagged because of the keyword Christian, tried a test run and used the word Muslim, and it actually went through, and that one seemed to be approved. So a lot of algorithms at play, and that's kind of what they hide behind a lot of times. But it seems to be more often than not the people that run into issues are conservatives and Christians who are trying to use these platforms, which are run by largely secular leftist leaning individuals.
Well, thanks, Dan. And for these stories and more, you can visit FaithWire on Facebook and on the web at faithwire.com.
Coming up, musician and actor Harry Connick Jr.'s 3 wishes when it comes to living out his faith.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
It is Christmas in July on PureFlix right now with a Harry Connick Jr. movie playing. It's called Angels Sing. It also stars Willie Nelson as a mysterious stranger who helps Connick's character, Michael, overcome tragedies in his past and present to find his Christmas spirit again. Connick speaks openly about his faith and says when it comes to faith, he focuses on one thing to keep it simple.
If you had 3 wishes, what would you want? And I said, if I had 3 wishes, I would want to do God's will, I want to do God's will, I want to do God's will. That's all I want. I just want to do what I'm supposed to do. And for me, knowing that that is the premise upon which everything else is built.
You can find out more about Connick's movie Angels Sing playing on PureFlix and more of the story about his faith at CBNNews.com. That is it for this edition of Newswatch. We hope that you'll join us next time. Have a great weekend.